The Alpha King forced her to bless his second mate. She vanished before the ceremony. What could make her disappear before the ceremony even began? And why would the Alpha King force her to bless the woman chosen as his second mate? If you love emotional stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more. Tell me in the comments, would you stay and give your blessing, or would you walk away? Sometimes the hardest choice is not whether to hold on, but whether staying means losing too much of yourself. And when duty, love, and dignity collide, even one decision can change everything. So keep listening, because this story begins with a command she never expected to hear. You will bless her. Claire Bennet thought she had misunderstood him. The royal council chamber was so quiet that she could hear the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace. 12 elders sat around the long oak table, their attention shifting between Claire and the man standing at its head. Ethan Blackwood, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, looked exactly as he always did during council meetings, controlled, certain, impossible to read. Claire had stood beside him for 6 years. She had helped settle pack disputes, organized winter relief, listened to frightened Omegas who were too intimidated to approach the council, and carried the responsibilities of Luna without ever asking whether anyone noticed. She had believed that meant something to him. 20 minutes earlier, Ethan had announced that Madeline Hayes would become his second mate. The Hayes Alliance controlled 3 important border territories, and according to Ethan, formalizing the bond would secure peace between their packs. Claire had listened without interrupting, even while something inside her quietly broke. But this was different. Say that again, she said. Ethan's grey eyes met hers. The ceremony requires the Luna's blessing. Claire folded her hands to stop them from trembling. I know what the ceremony requires. One elder lowered his gaze. Another suddenly became interested in the papers before him. They all understood what Ethan was asking. Claire would stand before the kingdom, take Madeline's hands, and publicly bless the woman being welcomed into the bond she had once believed belonged only to her. Then you understand why you must be there, Ethan said. Claire stared at him. Must. His expression tightened slightly. Claire, this is not personal. The words almost made her laugh. You are taking a second mate, and you want me to bless her in front of the entire kingdom. What part of that is not personal? Ethan drew a measured breath. The Alliance protects thousands of people. I cannot make decisions based only on what any one person feels. Any one person. Claire repeated the phrase softly, testing how little space 6 years could occupy inside 4 words. Ethan stepped around the table. You are Luna. You understand duty better than anyone in this room. I thought I did. Claire looked toward the windows. Beyond the glass, workers were already hanging silver banners across the courtyard for tomorrow's ceremony. She wondered how long preparations had been underway before anyone thought to tell her. Then she looked back at Ethan. Are you asking me to do this? Something changed in his face, perhaps because he finally heard the question beneath the question. But the council was watching, and Ethan had always been a king before he allowed himself to be anything else. I am telling you what duty requires. The last fragile hope inside Claire went still. She nodded once. No tears. No argument. No dramatic refusal. Her calm seemed to confuse him. Claire, I heard you. She gathered the petitions she had brought to council and placed them neatly into a folder. Ethan watched her. The blessing will take place tomorrow at noon. I know. I need your answer. Claire paused at the chamber doors and looked back at the man she had spent years standing beside. For the first time, she saw how completely he had mistaken her loyalty for permanence. Her voice was gentle when she answered. Then duty will have my answer tomorrow. By 9 the next morning, everyone in Blackwood Palace seemed to believe Claire had accepted what was coming. She moved through the East Wing with her usual quiet efficiency, dressed in a simple cream dress, her chestnut hair pinned loosely behind her shoulders. She reviewed the breakfast inventory with Mrs. Carter, approved medicine requests from the healing rooms, signed 3 winter supply orders, and answered 2 petitions from Omega families seeking temporary housing. Nothing about her suggested that in 3 hours she was expected to stand before the kingdom and bless another woman beside her mate. That calm unsettled the servants more than tears would have. My lady, Mrs. Carter said carefully as Claire returned a ledger, should I have your ceremonial gown brought upstairs? Claire looked at the older woman who had served the Blackwood family for nearly 30 years. No. Leave it where it is. Mrs. Carter hesitated. But the ceremony, I know. Claire offered a small smile and walked on. In the administrative office, she spent nearly an hour organizing the programs she had managed personally. Housing petitions went to Councilwoman Reed. The Winter Food Network went to Marcus Hale. The Omega Education Fund received updated instructions and 6 months of scheduled allocations. Claire labeled every folder clearly. Nothing was abandoned. Nothing was left unfinished. When her young assistant, Sophie, entered carrying another stack of documents, she stopped beside the desk. Why are you transferring everything? Claire continued writing. Because someone will need to know where things are. You know where they are. Claire's pen paused. Tomorrow, that will not matter. Sophie stared at her. Are you leaving? Claire lifted her eyes but did not answer. Before Sophie could ask again, footsteps sounded outside. Madeline Hayes appeared in the doorway wearing a pale blue ceremonial dress while 2 attendants waited behind her. She was beautiful in the polished way court expected, but her expression carried none of the triumph Claire had imagined. May I speak with you? Madeline asked. Claire dismissed Sophie gently, then closed the final folder. Madeline stepped inside. I know you probably hate me. I do not know you well enough to hate you. Madeline seemed surprised. You have every reason. My problem is not with you. Claire stood and crossed toward the window. Below, workers arranged white flowers around the ceremonial courtyard. Did Ethan ask whether you wanted this? Silence answered first. Claire turned. Madeline's eyes had dropped to the floor. My father negotiated the alliance, she said. That was not my question. Madeline looked up. Claire repeated it softly. Did Ethan ask whether you wanted to become his second mate? No, something inside Claire shifted. Until that moment, she had imagined Madeline standing on the opposite side of her humiliation. Now she saw another woman placed carefully inside someone else's decision. Then perhaps neither of us is the problem, Claire said. Madeline swallowed. You are still going to give the blessing? Claire looked toward the clock. 10:30. 90 minutes remained. Ethan told me duty required an answer. She returned to the desk, placed the last folder into Sophie's tray, and removed the royal seal from her pocket. For 6 years, she had carried it everywhere. She set it gently beside the records. Madeline stared at the seal. Claire, what are you doing? Claire's expression remained calm. Making sure tomorrow belongs to the people who plan to be here for it. At 11:15, Claire stood alone in the bedroom she had shared with Ethan for 6 years and realized how little of it had ever truly belonged to her. The carved walnut furniture belonged to the Blackwood family. The paintings belonged to the crown. Even the silver-backed brushes on the dressing table had been presented to the Luna during her first winter at the palace. Claire opened the wardrobe and removed one small traveling bag she had owned before becoming Luna. Into it went 2 simple dresses, a sweater, comfortable shoes, several photographs of her parents, and the small amount of money she had kept in her personal account. She wanted nothing that could be mistaken for royal property. Outside the windows, carriage doors closed and voices drifted across the courtyard as guests continued arriving for the noon ceremony. Claire could see white flowers lining the stone walkway. 6 years earlier, flowers had covered that same courtyard when the kingdom welcomed her as Ethan's Luna. She remembered his hand around hers that day, warm and certain. She remembered believing that whatever happened, they would face it together. Somewhere along the way, together had become a word Ethan used only when their choices were already his. Claire sat at the dressing table and looked at the ring on her left hand. The Blackwood Luna ring was simple compared with the crown jewels, a band of white gold surrounding a pale moonstone. Ethan had placed it on her finger himself. Whatever the kingdom asks of us, he had told her then, you will never stand alone. Claire closed her eyes. For one dangerous second, she wanted to stay. She wanted Ethan to open the door, see the bag, understand everything without being told, and say the one thing she had waited to hear since yesterday. I was wrong. But the hallway remained silent. Claire removed the ring. The skin beneath it was slightly lighter, a narrow reminder of how long she had worn it. She placed the ring beside the royal seal and took out a sheet of stationery. She did not write an accusation. She did not beg Ethan to follow. She wrote only what she needed him to understand. You wanted my blessing for the woman who would stand where I once stood. My final blessing is simpler. May neither of us ever again be asked to disappear so someone else can call it duty. Claire folded the letter and placed it beneath the ring. A quiet knock came at the door. Sophie entered, saw the traveling bag, and immediately covered her mouth. You really are leaving? Claire stood. I am. Where will you go? Somewhere I can remember who I was before everyone started calling me Luna. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Should I tell him? Claire looked toward the clock. 11:30. After I am gone. He will come after you. Claire was no longer certain. That uncertainty hurt, but it also made leaving necessary. She hugged Sophie gently, then picked up her bag. Instead of taking the main staircase, Claire used the servants' corridor leading toward the eastern garden. She passed the healing rooms she had expanded, the kitchen where she had spent winter nights organizing meals during shortages, and the small council archive where hundreds of petitions carried her signature. She stopped only once, at the garden gate. Beyond it, the road curved through 12 miles of Blackwood Forest before reaching neutral territory. Behind her, palace bells began their first call for the ceremony. Claire did not look back. At 11:42, while the Alpha King waited for his Luna to dress for duty, Claire Bennett crossed the eastern boundary of Blackwood land without her title, without her ring, and for the first time in 6 years, carrying nothing that belonged to anyone but herself. At 12 o'clock, the ceremonial courtyard was full, the bells were ringing, and Claire's chair remained empty. Ethan stood beneath the white stone arch beside Madeline Hayes while hundreds of guests waited in increasingly uncomfortable silence. The first delay seemed harmless. 5 minutes became 10. At 12:15, an elder quietly approached Ethan. Your Majesty, perhaps the Luna requires assistance. Ethan looked toward the palace doors. She will come. He said it with the certainty of a man who had spent 6 years believing Claire always would. Madeline stood several feet away, pale blue fabric gathered between her fingers. Ethan. He glanced at her. She transferred her responsibilities this morning. His expression sharpened. What? She left the royal seal in the administrative office. Before Ethan could answer, Sophie appeared at the edge of the courtyard. Her face told him the truth before she spoke. Your Majesty, you need to see her room. Ethan left the ceremony without another word. He crossed the palace faster than dignity usually allowed, climbed the eastern staircase, and pushed open the bedroom door. Claire. Silence. The room looked almost unchanged until he noticed the wardrobe. The simple clothes she had owned before becoming Luna were gone. Her old traveling bag was missing. On the dressing table lay the royal seal. Beside it rested the moonstone ring. Ethan stopped. For 6 years, he had seen that ring on Claire's hand every day. He picked it up slowly, then noticed the folded letter underneath. His eyes moved across the words once. Then again. You wanted my blessing for the woman who would stand where I once stood. My final blessing is simpler. May neither of us ever again be asked to disappear so someone else can call it duty. Ethan lowered the page. Where is she? Sophie stood near the doorway. She left before the ceremony. Where did she go? She did not tell me. Ethan looked toward the windows. How long ago? About half an hour. His first instinct was immediate. Send riders. Close the eastern road. Bring her back before she crossed beyond Blackwood authority. The commands formed easily because commands had always formed easily for him. Then his eyes returned to Claire's letter. Asked to disappear. The phrase landed differently now. He had spent the previous day telling himself that Claire understood sacrifice because she understood leadership. He had never asked whether the sacrifice was hers to make. Ethan closed his hand around the ring but gave no order. When he returned to the courtyard, the guests rose expectantly. Madeline watched him approach alone. Councilman Reed stepped forward. Shall we continue? Ethan looked at the empty chair reserved for Claire. The Luna's blessing is required. Yes, Your Majesty. And it must be freely given. The elder hesitated. Traditionally, yes. Ethan finally understood the difference between tradition and consent. Then there will be no blessing today. A murmur spread across the courtyard. Madeline's shoulders loosened almost imperceptibly. One elder approached. The Hayes delegation will consider postponement an insult. Then they may consider it. Ethan's voice remained calm, but something inside him had shifted. This ceremony is postponed. He turned away from the arch and saw Mrs. Carter standing near the palace entrance holding a thick stack of folders. Your Majesty, she said, there are matters the Luna normally handles afternoon council. Ethan almost replied that Claire would handle them tomorrow. The words stopped before leaving his mouth. Claire would not be there tomorrow. He looked at the folders, then at the courtyard she had prepared for a ceremony that would replace her, and finally at the small moonstone ring still resting in his palm. For the first time in 6 years, Ethan Blackwood was beginning to see how much of his kingdom had depended on a woman he had expected to remain simply because he had never imagined she might choose herself. By the next morning, Ethan understood that Claire had not simply left a bedroom empty. She had left spaces everywhere. At 8 o'clock, 3 Omega families arrived for appointments Claire had scheduled weeks earlier. At 8:30, the healing rooms requested approval for winter medicine purchases she normally reviewed. Before 9, 2 pack leaders were waiting outside the council chamber because a boundary disagreement Claire had been quietly mediating was suddenly back on Ethan's desk. None of these problems were disasters. The kingdom continued functioning. But for the first time, Ethan saw the invisible work that had kept small problems from becoming large ones. Claire had never announced what she carried. She had simply carried it. Mrs. Carter placed another folder before him. These are the housing requests Lady Claire reviewed every Thursday. Ethan opened it. Names filled the pages, along with Claire's handwritten notes about children, elderly relatives, employment, and temporary accommodations. She remembered details Ethan had never known existed. Who takes this now? He asked. Mrs. Carter hesitated. She was training Councilwoman Reed, but the transfer was not supposed to happen this quickly. Ethan looked at the neat instructions Claire had prepared before leaving. Even while walking away, she had made sure strangers would not suffer because of her decision. That realization hurt more than anger would have. Near noon, Madeline entered the council chamber alone. She had changed out of the ceremonial dress and wore a simple blue coat. My father wants another date, she said. Ethan closed the folder. There is no date. He believes postponing longer will weaken the alliance. Then we will negotiate another arrangement. Madeline studied him. Because Claire is gone. Ethan's jaw tightened. Because the blessing cannot be forced. You knew that yesterday. I knew the words. He looked down at Claire's handwriting. I did not understand them. Madeline remained silent for a moment. She asked whether I wanted this. Ethan looked up. What did you tell her? The truth. No one asked me. The room seemed colder. Ethan had spent months discussing borders, trade routes, and security guarantees with Madeline's father. Somehow, the two people expected to pay the most personal price had received the least voice. Do you want to become my second mate? Ethan asked. Madeline gave a sad smile. You are asking a little late. I am still asking. She took a breath. I do not know. I only know I do not want to stand beside someone while another woman is required to bless her own heartbreak. Ethan had no defense. After Madeline left, he remained alone until Sophie appeared with a sealed envelope. This arrived from the Eastern checkpoint. Ethan stood immediately. Claire. Not exactly. The letter came from Willow Ridge, a neutral territory nearly 100 miles east. A border clerk reported that Claire Bennett had registered for temporary residence there the previous afternoon. She had used no royal title and requested no Blackwood protection. Ethan read the address twice. Relief came first. She was safe. Then came the instinct to summon a car, travel to Willow Ridge, and bring her home. He reached for his coat before Claire's letter returned to him with painful clarity. She had left because he had mistaken authority for permission. Going after her only to issue another command would prove she had been right to leave. Ethan slowly set the coat back down. That evening, he stood alone in their room holding the moonstone ring. For 6 years, he had believed love meant Claire would always remain beside him. Now he faced a harder question. If he truly loved her, could he respect the possibility that she might never come back? Claire had expected freedom to feel dramatic. Instead, it felt like standing in a grocery store in Willow Ridge on Tuesday morning, holding 2 brands of coffee and realizing no one cared which one she chose. There were no servants waiting for instructions, no council schedule tucked beneath her breakfast plate, no royal seal in her pocket. She rented a small cottage behind the Willow Ridge community house, bought groceries with her own money, and introduced herself simply as Claire Bennett. Nobody called her Luna. The first few days, the absence of responsibility felt almost uncomfortable. Then she began helping at the community house, first organizing donated supplies, then assisting with housing applications for Omegas and widowed pack members. She did not take charge because anyone expected it. She helped because she wanted to. 2 weeks passed before Ethan came. Claire was carrying a box of donated books toward the community house when a familiar black car stopped beside the curb. Her steps slowed. Ethan emerged alone. No royal escort. No council members. No command waiting behind him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Claire had imagined this moment during too many sleepless nights. In some versions, she shouted. In others, she cried. Standing there now, she felt only a quiet ache. You found me, she said. I knew where you were the day after you left. Claire's expression changed. Then why did you wait? Ethan looked toward the cottage behind her. Because going after you immediately felt too much like another order. That answer reached somewhere she had tried to keep guarded. She shifted the box in her arms. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, then stopped himself. May I? Claire hesitated before handing him the box. He carried it beside her toward the community house. People passed them without bowing. Ethan seemed strangely out of place without a throne, guards, or elders surrounding him. At the entrance, Claire took the box back. Why are you here? To ask you to come home. She had known the words were coming. They still hurt. Claire looked around at the modest street, the bakery across the road, the cottage where she had learned to sleep without waiting for tomorrow's obligations. I am home. Ethan went still. Claire. Do not ask me to return to the same life I had to disappear from. The ceremony did not happen. Her eyes lifted sharply. Because I was not there to bless it. Because I finally understood that your blessing could not mean anything if I forced you to give it. Claire studied him. And Madeline? There is no new ceremony scheduled. That was not what I asked. Ethan fell silent. Claire saw the answer before he gave it. He was still thinking like a king trying to solve a political problem, even while attempting to speak like the man she had loved. Do you still intend to take her as your second mate? She asked. The alliance remains important. Claire nodded slowly. There it is. I am trying to protect thousands of people. And I never asked you not to. Her voice remained gentle, which somehow made the words heavier. I only stopped agreeing that my dignity should be part of the price. Ethan looked at her as though the distinction had finally become impossible to avoid. Claire continued. If you choose the alliance, choose it. If Madeline chooses the bond, that is her decision. But do not ask me to stand there smiling so everyone else can feel comfortable about what it costs me. What would you have me do? Ethan asked. Claire looked at the Alpha King who had once believed every difficult choice belonged on someone else's shoulders. For once, decide without asking me to carry the cost. Ethan did not answer immediately. The street around them continued as if nothing important had happened. A delivery truck rolled past the community house. Someone opened the bakery across the road, releasing the warm scent of bread into the cool afternoon air. Claire waited, but for once she refused to rescue Ethan from an uncomfortable silence. You are right, he finally said. She had wanted those words for weeks. Hearing them now did not erase anything. About what? About the cost. Ethan looked toward the community house. I kept calling the alliance necessary because that made every consequence sound unavoidable. But the alliance was negotiated by men sitting around a table. You and Madeline were expected to make it possible. Claire folded her arms against the cold. And when I objected, his expression tightened. I called your pain duty. The honesty surprised her. Yes. Ethan looked back at her. I was wrong. Claire swallowed. Part of her still remembered the man who had once stayed awake beside her through winter council sessions, bringing her coffee when she forgot to eat. That man had not vanished. But neither had the king who had looked into her eyes and told her she would bless another mate because duty required it. Loving one did not excuse the other. What happens now? She asked. I return to Blackwood. And the alliance? I find another way. Claire searched his face. Because you think that will bring me back? No, the answer came quickly. I hope you come back someday. I will not lie about that. But if changing my decision only matters when you reward me for it, then I have learned nothing. Claire felt her defenses shift, not disappear. And Madeline? I will ask her what she wants before another agreement is discussed. Claire nodded. That would be a beginning. Ethan glanced toward her cottage. Are you happy here? The question was so simple that it almost hurt. I am learning to be. Then I will not ask you to leave again. For several seconds, they stood facing each other without titles between them. Ethan reached into his coat and removed a small velvet pouch. Claire knew what was inside before he opened his hand. The moonstone lunar ring rested against the dark fabric. I brought this because I thought I should return it to you. Claire stared at the ring she had worn for 6 years. It belongs to Blackwood. It was given to you. As Luna. Ethan considered that, then closed the pouch. Then I will keep it safe unless you ever ask for it. He did not offer it again. Claire appreciated that more than she wanted to admit. Goodbye, Ethan. Pain crossed his face, quiet and unguarded. Goodbye, Claire. He walked back toward the car alone. Claire watched until it disappeared beyond the corner, then returned to the community house. 3 days later, Ethan entered the Blackwood Council chamber carrying no marriage contract. Madeline and her father were already waiting. Councilman Reed began discussing a new date for the postponed ceremony, but Ethan raised one hand. There will be no new date. Madeline's father stood. The alliance requires this bond. No, Ethan said. The alliance requires cooperation. We decided the bond was the easiest way to obtain it. His gaze moved to Madeline. And no. One asked the two people expected to live with that decision. Madeline slowly straightened. Ethan asked the question he should have asked months earlier. Madeline Hayes, do you freely choose to become my second mate? The entire council waited. Madeline looked at her father, then at Ethan. For the first time, the decision was actually hers. No, she said. Madeline's refusal seemed to change the temperature of the council chamber. Her father stared at her as if the word had come from someone else. You do not understand what is at stake, he said. Madeline remained seated, but her shoulders straightened. I understand exactly what is at stake. I am simply done pretending that makes my answer irrelevant. Ethan watched her and heard Claire in the silence that followed. Not her words, but the lesson he had been too certain to learn until she left. Madeline looked toward him. If Claire had stayed, 2 women would have paid for an agreement made by men. No elder challenged her. Ethan turned to the territorial maps covering the council table. The border dispute was real. Trade access mattered. Security mattered. But none of those problems required a second mate. That had only been the fastest solution, and powerful people often called something necessary when they really meant convenient. The proposed bond is cancelled, Ethan said. Madeline's father rose sharply. Then the Hayes alliance is finished. No. The marriage arrangement is finished. If our territories cannot cooperate without controlling the lives of 2 women, then we never had an alliance worth preserving. For the next 6 weeks, Ethan did what he should have done from the beginning. He negotiated. The process was slower, more frustrating, and far less ceremonial. Border patrol responsibilities were divided between both territories. Trade access was guaranteed through written agreements. A neutral council was established to resolve future disputes. No mate bond was required. No blessing was required. Madeline returned home with her own future intact. Claire heard about the agreement from a Willow Ridge councilwoman, not from Ethan. He never sent a letter asking whether she was impressed. He never used the political settlement as proof that he deserved forgiveness. That mattered. Meanwhile, Claire built something of her own. The community house expanded its housing program, and she helped create a small legal assistance office for Omegas who needed independent advice before signing pack agreements. Her days became full again, but differently. She could say yes because she wanted to help. She could say no without fearing she had failed a kingdom. 2 months after Ethan's visit, an invitation arrived from Blackwood Palace. Claire almost returned it unopened until she saw the purpose. Representatives from 6 territories were meeting to create a shared Omega welfare agreement, and Willow Ridge had selected Claire as one of its delegates. The invitation addressed her as Claire Bennett. No Luna. No royal title. No personal message from Ethan. She read it 3 times before accepting. On the morning of the gathering, Claire entered Blackwood Palace through the same doors she had once believed she would never see again. Nothing had changed, and everything had. The marble floors still reflected the tall windows. The council clock still ticked above the fireplace. But Claire was not carrying the royal seal. She carried Willow Ridge documents. When she entered the council chamber, conversations quieted. Ethan stood at the far end of the room. For one suspended moment, neither moved. Then Ethan did something the old Alpha King would never have done. He waited. Claire walked forward because she chose to. She stopped several feet away. His grey eyes held hers. "Welcome back, Claire." She glanced around the chamber where he had once told her duty required her obedience. "I am here for Willow Ridge. I know." No disappointment entered his voice. No claim. No request. Just acceptance. Claire looked at him again and realized the greatest change was not that Ethan had cancelled the second mate arrangement. It was that he had finally learned to leave space for an answer he might not want. And for the first time since she vanished, Claire wondered whether leaving Blackwood had truly been the end of their story, or whether it had only been the end of the story they could know longer afford to keep living. The gathering lasted nearly 4 hours, and Claire spent most of it doing exactly what she had returned to Blackwood to do. She spoke for Willow Ridge, challenged 2 clauses that could have limited an Omega's right to seek independent counsel, and helped negotiate emergency housing protections between 6 territories. Ethan never interrupted her. When she disagreed with him, he listened. When the council accepted one of her revisions, he gave her no special praise that might reduce her work to a favor from the king. He treated her as what she had become, a representative whose voice carried its own weight. By sunset, the final agreement was ready for review. Delegates slowly left the chamber until Claire found herself gathering papers at the long oak table where everything between them had changed months earlier. Ethan remained near the windows. "Your car leaves at 7, he asked. 7:30. He nodded. "Then I will not keep you." Claire almost smiled. "You have become very careful about telling me what to do. I had an expensive education. Expensive for both of us." His expression softened with regret. "Yes." Claire closed her folder. "Madeline wrote to me." Ethan looked surprised. "She told me about the new alliance agreement. It took 6 weeks. Apparently diplomacy is harder when marriage is not being used as a shortcut." A faint smile touched his face. "Much harder." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. Claire looked around the chamber. "Do you still have the ring?" Ethan did not pretend to misunderstand. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you asked me to keep it safe unless you wanted it." Claire studied him. "You could have sent it." "I could have." "You could have sent letters." "I wrote several." Her eyebrows lifted. "I never received them. I never sent them." That answer surprised a quiet laugh from her. Ethan looked down for a moment. "Most of them were apologies that somehow ended by asking you to come back." Eventually I realized that was still me trying to turn regret into an outcome. Claire felt the old ache in her chest, but it no longer controlled her. I did love you, Ethan. I know. That was. Why leaving hurt? He met her eyes. I loved you too. I just confused being loved with being entitled to your sacrifice. Claire breathed slowly. Months ago, she would have given anything to hear him understand that. Now she did not need the words to survive, which made them easier to believe. Ethan reached into his coat but stopped before removing anything. The ring is with me. I will not offer it unless you ask. Claire looked at his hand, then back at him. Keep it. Pain flickered across his face, but he nodded. All right. She stepped closer. I did not say forever. Ethan went completely still. Claire continued before hope could become assumption. I am not returning as the woman who left. I have work in Willow Ridge. I have a home there. I have a life that does not disappear when I am not standing beside you. I would never ask you to give that up. Good. Claire's voice softened. Because I will never disappear for anyone again. Ethan held her gaze. And I will never ask you to bless what breaks you again. The words returned them both to that terrible morning, but this time there was no counsel waiting for Claire to obey. No ceremony. No second mate. Only two people standing in the aftermath of choices they could not undo. I cannot promise everything goes back to the way it was, Claire said. I do not want it to. Then what do you want? Ethan asked. Claire smiled slightly. Maybe dinner the next time you visit Willow Ridge. May I visit? You may ask. Ethan almost smiled. Claire Bennett, may I visit you in Willow Ridge? She let him wait just long enough to understand that waiting mattered. Yes. When Claire turned toward the doors, Ethan did not follow. She walked several steps, then stopped and looked back. Months earlier, she had crossed Blackwood's boundary because staying meant losing herself. Tonight, she could leave knowing the door behind her was no longer a cage. Claire returned to Ethan and held out her hand. He looked at it before gently taking it. No command passed between them. No kingdom demanded anything. And when Claire stayed beside the Alpha King for one quiet moment longer, she stayed because the choice was finally hers.